Hi everybody, this is Anthropology of Business Ant 2050 at Wayne State. I'm so sorry to cancel literally the second day of class, but I'm sick, so I didn't want to, get any of you sick. We will play it by ear for Tuesday, whether I'm ready to get back into action and do a lecture in person, but today I'm just gonna have a little video lecture for you, and hopefully it's not too long. Hopefully I make it through it, but by this point in time, you should have already watched the 2 YouTube videos that I assigned. So if you haven't done that already, do it. And yeah, just, we'll give you a second. It's okay. Go watch them. Okay, so what is anthropology? That's probably a big question in a lot of your guys' minds right now. It's the biggest question that my family always asks me, what is anthropology? So this is the definition that we will be working with. Anthropology is basically just the study of all humans everywhere at all times. Anthro means human, ology means the study of. So it's literally just the study of humans. This could be at any point in time or space or anything to do with humans too. So it's super, super broad. To help with that, we have the 4-field approach. The 4 fields of anthropology are archaeology, biology, linguistics, and cultural. It's important that you know these. We're in cultural right now, but I'm gonna go through each of them just so you kind of have some background. Archaeology is one of the 4 main subfields of anthropology. This is going to be the study of material culture, usually through excavation. And we can find artifacts through excavation, dig up things like old pots and sometimes even literally garbage. And it can tell us a lot about prehistory, history, and modern day. We have a great archaeology department here in our anthropology department. So if you're interested in this, I encourage you to check it out. Sometimes the department even has opportunities for undergrads to go on digs and actually work on an excavation or work with the artifacts. So if this interests you, I would definitely encourage you to look into it. You can reach out to me or whatever. Next we have linguistic anthropology, and this focuses on languages and symbols and how they connect to culture. So I have this little comic in the bottom left, and there's kind of this super, classic linguistics study where they found the Inuit populations, previously known as Eskimos, have like a bajillion different words for snow, right? And that's a cultural difference between us and them. We only have like snow, ice, slush, sleet, wintry mix. We only have so many words for snow, and they have a lot more. The cultural side of this is that they have a lot more snow around them, and it's a lot more pervasive and important in their lives. So it might be reflective of snow's greater importance and pervasiveness in their lives that they have so many words to distinguish between different kinds of snow. The comic is 2 Inuit people, and one of them is saying, did you know that suburban white males have over 100 words for lawn? So, just kind of making fun of the whole thing and flipping the script. I also wanted to point out that there's a lot of subfields. So you don't need to know these, but these are just some subfields of linguistics to make the point that even within these 4 subfields, we have a bunch more subfields. Next, we have biological anthropology. This is where biology meets culture. I expect that a lot of you would be interested in this. I know that we had some nursing students and stuff like that in the class. So this is going to include things like primatology, which is the study of all primates. So like apes and monkeys and stuff that can technically fall under anthropology. There's paleoanthropology, which is studying the people of, way back in the past, like Neanderthals and stuff like that. And then there's forensic anthropology, which can literally be forensics, like you would see on one of those like special crime unit shows or whatever. It's a really cool field, and again, I encourage you to look into it. I believe we also have a biological anthropology lab here at Wayne State with some really cool opportunities. And then lastly, we have cultural or social anthropology. It can be called either. This is, in my opinion, the broadest because it studies all cultures around the world at all points in time. That's what we're doing right now, okay? Business anthropology is one of those subfields of cultural anthropology. A major method or kind of way of doing research in cultural anthropology is ethnography. So that's where you're going to really immerse yourself with a culture or a people or a context, and you're going to learn everything that you possibly can. You're going to try to get that insider perspective. You're going to do observations, you're going to do interviews, and you're just generally going to live like you're one of them. This can help you get a lot of insights about culture. There's tons of subfields in cultural anthropology, like medical anthropology. Wayne State also does pretty good with medical anthropology, so if you're interested, definitely look into that. It's kind of interesting that medical anthropology is technically cultural and not biological, but that's the way it is. There's psychological anthropology and business anthropology and a bunch of other ones. And not only do we do this kind of research with people who are, from far off lands and the kind of classic anthropology going to like a small tribe in Africa and, living with them, and, learning about their culture or whatever, but we can also do cultural anthropology right here and with people who are like us. That's the kind of research that I do, and that's kind of more what we're going to be talking about in this class. We're going to be talking mostly, if not exclusively, about the developed world. And we're going to talk about the West a lot, but we will dabble in, global stuff and other countries as well. So it's really important here to define what culture is, we're talking about cultural anthropology, but culture itself is such a wishy-washy term. This is the definition that we'll be working off of. Culture is the shared set of implicit and explicit values, ideas, concepts, and rules of behavior that allow a social group to function and perpetuate itself. So I underlined some really key terms here. It's important that it's shared, right? If it's just you who's acting this way, or like you and your buddy, it's not really culture so much as just like a way that you're being. Values, ideas, concepts, and rules are all of the, the ways that culture is kind of expressed. So values might be like, we value blood-related family in the West, right? So we see somebody who is our aunt's child as related to us. That's our cousin, because of blood relation and technical biological relation, and that makes them potentially important to us as family most of the time. So if your cousin is in need, you might go out of your way to help them, as opposed to how you would with just a friend or a stranger. That was kind of a bad example, but hopefully you catch my drift. There's also stuff like ideas. So money is kind of an idea. It represents something. It's really just paper, but it does represent something, and we share that idea and agree upon it, and that's what gives money value and meaning. Concepts, kind of similar to ideas. I'm just gonna skip it. And rules of behavior. So there's certain ways that you're supposed to act in culture. For example, a really classic example is when you get in the elevator and you are supposed to face forward. You're supposed to face towards the doors, right? It's really weird if somebody gets in the elevator and faces the back. Like, it'll make everyone uncomfortable. So that's like a really small rule of behavior that we share in our culture that like maybe doesn't necessarily have any sort of function, but it does make people comfortable because we share it. And this all helps a social group function and perpetuate itself. So without money and without those sort of social ordering rules, or without the valuing of certain groups of people that we perceive as related to ourselves, it would be difficult for our society to function in the way it is. This is kind of just a further breakdown of how the subfields and sub-subfields work. So we have anthropology, and then we have it broken down into the 4 main subfields, and then a few examples of the sub-subfields of cultural anthropology, and business anthropology actually falls subfield under economic anthropology. So that's just to help you orient yourself. So business anthropology is applied anthropology and cultural anthropology. I think we might talk about it in a second, but if we don't, applied anthropology is anthropology put to use. That's kind of the classic definition. It's potentially going to be a test question, but it's important to understand that business anthropology, you're actually intending to do something with it. It's not just research for knowledge's sake. You know, a lot of the time, more classic research and cultural anthropology will be just trying to understand people or see how they work, or, you know, what have you. But business anthropology has a more applied goal in mind than just knowledge. You know, it might be to improve a company or improve a daily experience of people, something like that. And in business anthropology, of course, this is specifically applying anthropological ideas and methods to businesses and related topics. So now we come to the first video. I hope that you watched it. If you didn't, again, go back and do that now. So the first video that we watched was Navigating Business Through an Anthropological Lens by Menon. This is kind of helpful for connecting business anthropology to a more traditional anthropology and understanding what they have to do with each other. And she lays out 3 important aspects of kind of this ethnographic idea, right? So we talked a couple of slides previously about ethnography as a major way that cultural anthropology functions, right? She here is talking about what exactly this does, and especially in relation to business anthropology. So first, she says that it helps you become a trusted insider. This uncovers people's unconscious motivations, and then it helps if you're on location to get more authentic data. And then participant observation is another thing that she talks about, where we watch, we don't ask, you know? It's easy to ask somebody, you know, how do you wash your hands? And they'll tell you. But you're gonna get a little bit of a different answer if instead you tell them, wash your hands for me. Like, let me watch you wash your hands. A interesting example of this that I threw up on the screen is a book called Food Waste. In this book, it's a super short book, so if you're interested in this kind of thing, I really recommend it. But it's a really short book where this guy was working on figuring out why people waste so much food, or how food ends up getting wasted. So instead of just asking people, you know, why do you throw food away? Or why do you buy more food than you need that you know is gonna end up getting wasted? Instead, he went to the grocery store with people and observed their shopping experience. That's participant observation, because he's observing, but he's also participating. He also looked through people's fridges. So he went into their home, opened up the fridge, the freezer, and like looked through it. And he was able to find some really interesting insights, such as sometimes people end up wasting food because they purchased like aspirational foods. So like those healthy things that you buy because you're like aspiring to eat healthier, but then you never actually bring yourself to eat it, and then it ends up going bad and you throw it away. So that's a good example of participant observation and what you can do as a trusted insider when you're doing ethnography. Second, she talks about anthropology using a different starting point. And really what we're talking about here is what the human needs are that need to be addressed. By starting kind of from the base level there and from the experiences and perspectives of people as opposed to our outside perspective, we hope to have less bias in this process. Third, we are able to unearth conflicts and find deeper meanings. She says a really good quote in this part that I want to highlight. There's a conflict between what people think they should do, what they want to do, and what they actually do. There's also a conflict with what people actually do and what they say they do, and they might not even necessarily be lying, they just might not be aware. So that's a really good strength of participant observation and ethnography, is if we're there and if we're watching with the intent to be analyzing these things and these actions, we can begin to separate out the conflicts between what people think they should do, what they want to do, and what they actually do. She also points out that these conflicts that people have are rooted in our culture. So, for example, there's a health and wellness study where they talk about healthy foods versus status and social stuff. So she talks about how they're trying to eat healthy and they say that they eat healthy, but then when you go over to their house, they offer you unhealthy foods. And they don't even realize that there's this disconnect, right? But through ethnography, she was able to put it together that these unhealthy foods are considered status foods. And in that culture, it's important to showcase status when you have people over as, a respect thing, a social thing. So people bring out the unhealthy foods and they share them with you. So that's kind of contrary to what the people would say that they do. And she was able to find that conflict and deeper meaning through ethnography and participant observation. Lastly, she also is arguing for a human-centered approach. That's important when we're talking about business anthropology, because I think that a more traditional business approach can really get lost with economics and money and functioning and the statistics and everything. But anthropology brings a little bit of a different perspective that gives a human-centered approach and can do these three things that I listed on the screen. So let's move on to our next video. Our other video was the human insights missing from big data with Wang. Again, if you haven't watched this, watch it. This is a super short lecture, so you have no excuse. But the thing that I really want to highlight is that she talks about thick data and big data being better together. That's really important for the purposes of our class and understanding why anthropology is important to business. Why do we need to bring a whole nother field into it? Why do we need to do all this ethnography BS and whatever? It's not really gonna do anything. Business is probably fine on its own. But she talks about these two things, big data and thick data. So big data, the first one, that's your statistics and everything, okay? So big data is pervasive, it's big, it's numbers, they're everywhere, right? And these are really good at describing a lot of stuff very concisely. Thick data, on the other hand, is what business anthropologists do, what anthropologists do. It's qualitative data, okay? Which I think that we will probably talk about more in the future, but think qualitative data, quality. So it's quality over quantity, where big data covers a lot of ground. Thick data covers less ground, but much more in depth. So again, just to emphasize, we have big data, which is numbers, and then we have thick data, which is ideas and concepts. It's called thick data because your thick data, instead of just being a summary with a whole bunch of numbers, is going to be thick like a book because it's with words. The example that she gives is the Nokia story and the Netflix story. I don't know if any of you remember Nokia or like all the memes about Nokia, or if I'm just like a little bit older than you guys, but basically these phones were everywhere before smartphones, right? These Nokia phones were super popular, especially for how durable they were. That's where a lot of the memes came from. As you can see on the screen, there's like a hammer made out of Nokia phones, and there, like it says, vibrates in your pocket, breaks your leg, because these phones were just super durable. And when Wang was doing research for the company, they were trying to figure out what needed to be done in the market. And she went and gathered her data and then said, listen, you need to come out with a smartphone. That's what everybody wants. And they said, no, that's silly. Smartphones break so easily, and like our thing is durability. We're not gonna do that. So they only listened to the big data. They only listened to the numbers, because what they had tested and what they knew was that people liked the durability of Nokia, but they failed to account for the thick data and the actual lived experience and wants of people. And now Nokia is obsolete. You know, nobody has a Nokia anymore except for like maybe your great grandma or something. But so if they had listened to the thick data and her actual research that she did, maybe Nokia would still be around. So that's a good example of what anthropology can bring to business. It can save businesses, you know, it can create inventions, as we'll talk about later in the class. It can skyrocket businesses to be bigger than anyone ever expected, like the Netflix example. We're going to talk about Netflix more later in the semester, so I won't get too far into it, but basically Netflix was not that big of a deal until anthropology intervened, and anthropology was pivotal. This thick data, oh, my cat, this is her, she's being a demon. Oh my god, she's attacking me. Yeah. Anyway, back to the video. She also talks about the oracle and the temple guides, and I really want to highlight what that means, right? So she talks about the oracle as being analogous to big data. So we have the oracle, big data, quantitative numbers. Those are all the same thing, okay? And then we have qualitative data, thick data, and the oracle's temple guides. Those are all the same thing, okay? So it's a whole big analogy. Basically, she's explaining how big data and thick data do better together. Big data is amazing. Numbers, statistics, they can do really cool things and teach us really interesting things and be really useful, but so can thick data. And they're gonna go a lot further if we use them in tandem, if we use them together. So in this whole big metaphor, the oracle, the big data, she would just be, you know, a babbling, oh my god, she would just be a babbling mess without her temple guides. There would never be any sort of good advice or conclusions, and she wouldn't even be seen as an oracle without them. But the temple guides, without the big data, wouldn't have any sort of authority. Nobody would be there to talk to them. And they also wouldn't have her, you know, little bit of guidance from her prophecies or whatever. So the point here is that they really do better together. Lastly, to finish up, I want to talk a little bit about applied anthropology. This is the definition that I said earlier, anthropology put to use. And it's the use of anthropological research methods to solve practical problems. Applied anthropology exists in many different subfields, and it has more direct stakeholders. Applied anthropology really more directly connects with people and any identified problems, as opposed to a non-applied anthropology. And business anthropology is almost always, if not always, applied, as opposed to If you remember on the little chart that I made, business anthropology is a subfield, and the subfield is economic anthropology. Economic anthropology isn't necessarily always applied. Business anthropology is kind of the more applied section of economic anthropology. Okay, so finishing up, we have 2 things due before next class. We have a super short reading due called Here's Why Companies Are Desperate to Hire Anthropologists. It's an article from Business Insider. I really encourage you to read it. And then we have a 12-page book chapter called The Maturity of Business Anthropology, Policy and Strategy in a Global Age by Wall. So give those a read before Tuesday, and like I said before, they will be available on Canvas, and they are fair game on both the introduction quiz and in our first test. So make sure that you do them, and I will keep you posted if we are having class in person on Tuesday. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful weekend. Sorry I'm sick.